the act of realizing who you are, your authentic self underneath all of that hurtness, all the reactivity an unblemished, whole, complete self that's already there. So it's not about adding to ourselves. It's not about becoming somebody, turning into somebody new, or, reinventing ourselves. It's really just about peeling back the layers that keep us from seeing that we're whole and complete, and that we're unblemished, and that there's just this perfect person underneath, perfect in its own way, right? Not in some external definition of perfect.
Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day, to have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward. How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want, to be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Chris Cirak, who shares a path to your true self. Today's quote is from Muhammad Ali. It isn't the mountain ahead to climb that wears you out. It's the pebble in your shoe. You have to pay attention to the little things, and everything else is going to work out. We're going to chat about that in today's episode with Chris Cirak. He's a lifelong student and teacher of self-realization. He's devoted decades to uncovering the wisdom that allows one to live consciously and authentically. After an extensive corporate career, he experienced his own profound shifts from achieving outer success to finding inner joy and meaning. In our conversation, he'll share his powerful insights and practices that have helped transform his relationship with himself and life. We'll learn how to let go of limiting beliefs and stuck feelings and figure out who we really are. He'll also explain why radically changing external circumstances often fails to bring lasting fulfillment. He'll show us a simple way to do it. Chris has worked with renowned teachers like Eckhart Tolle, Dr. Brian Weiss, Byron Katie, and he actually is a trainer with the Eckhart Tolle retreats. Let's meet Chris and find out what he's got to share with us. Welcome to Richer Soul, Chris Cirak. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you, Rocky. It's such a pleasure. We've already been chatting. I can't wait to keep going.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Yeah, so both my parents were immigrants, and they literally lost everything and arrived with nothing. My dad managed to, despite all of that, become a doctor, and was very much in the healing and being of service mindset because of everything he'd been through, and supporting the family back home. And my mom, similar thing after being displaced from their countries. And so there's a sense of altruism in my family. And I really had to learn how to, embrace the doing, the achieving, the owning, the receiving. That was something that was foreign to me initially, and I was the first one to own a home, let alone multiple ones, and really have a career and but maintain a life work balance within all of that. So I spent the much of that first half of my life, if that's half, being very productive on the doing side of things.
Where were they from originally?
So my dad was from Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, and my mom from Czechoslovakia. Neither of those countries exist anymore. They met, and I was born in New York and grew up there. And then my dad also was a medical contractor for the military. So we wound up traveling a lot and moving around a lot. And that influenced me early on as well. And in terms of not having roots and not a consistent set of friends, not a true cultural identity. So back then it was a little stressful. But over time, I got to see that as a tremendous benefit. I wasn't really indoctrinated into one way of thinking, one cultural outlook. And it took some time, but like the tortoise, I eventually came out on top.
It's funny. I think those early experiences, and I use the word, it's part of it is like, how do you create grit? How do you create that ability to show up and push through and do all of that? And I honestly think a lot of it seems to come from an uncomfortable childhood. But there seems to be that line. Some people can't push through. Some people just give up, and others, it seems to be the spark that really gives them that way forward.
Yeah, that's a great question and insight too. I think everyone eventually does push through. It may take some time or multiple rounds, and it's just we have to learn our lessons, and our environment forges us. Our environment is a reflection of us. We're seeing, we're responding, we're reacting because of who we are on the inside. And so no two people experience the same situation alike. And so whatever it's showing us, that's what we're being called to work through and develop some grit around that and overcome our demons and let go of our fears and limiting beliefs and all that. So it'll keep coming back. The lessons keep coming until we face them and overcome them. And the great thing is then we become experts at those very things, the challenges that we're so in resistance to, right? That why me? Why is this happening to me? And all that. Well, it's happening so that you could become a leader and an authority in that space to others and help them overcome it, which is, when you think about it, we're so in resistance to the one thing that makes us, that becomes our calling, essentially. And so it's just about sticking it through and finding ways. There's never a straight path, but there's no way around it, only through it.
The obstacle is the way, right? Ryan Holiday.
It's pointing. Yeah, it's pointing you to the way.
So did your parents teach you about money at all, or was that not a conversation?
Not at all. It took me a while, primarily through friends that I had, maybe girlfriends that I had in college and around that time that showed me what investment looked like, what owning real estate looked like, and just really opened my eyes to all of that. And so again, it's the people you hang out with that have a huge influence on you. So I was lucky to be around some good, solid, influential examples around that time.
And that was going to be my question. Do most people carefully pick the people around them, or do they just, whoever shows up or wherever they show up, that's what they get? Yeah.
That's a great point. I think it's maybe a little bit of both. On one hand, I'm a true believer in certain types of, people, I call them angels, that show up and they guide you down a little path. Our worst enemies are often those very people that become our teachers and show us where we need to develop some stamina, some oomph, and work through something. Whatever triggers us, that's basically our biggest teacher. But then, of course, we also choose from who elevates us, who feels good to be around. That's an energy play right there. And same thing goes for relationships. We choose people with whom we can collaborate one way or another, that collaborate in terms of getting to know ourselves better. Ultimately, that they become a mirror, because we can't control people to keep covering up our own lack.
Why did you say that the people who kind of push us forward are our worst enemy?
Yeah, because we try to, always take the easy path, the easy route. And So we push away the things that are uncomfortable. At the most basic level, we push away thoughts and feelings that are not pleasant. And so that way we keep avoiding the things that are really triggering in the way that we really actually need to look at ourselves in those ways. And, from personal experience, the people that I avoided the most or that triggered me the most, and it could be a neighbor, it could be one of your peers, a family member. They tend to show up and just annoy the heck out of you. And there you have a choice to just keep avoiding them, which is giving away your power, which is allowing them to dictate how you feel and move and operate in this world. Or you learn to look at, well, why am I feeling triggered? What are they doing? It's not about them ultimately. What's inside of me that's needing some attention?
At the end of the day, it's always what's inside of you, but everyone wants to blame everything else instead of take the time to look at the mirror and figure out what's going on. So you go to college, you learn about money, you had success, you bought homes, you did all of that, but yet today you're really not on that path, are you? You kind of made a shift somewhere?
Yeah, so I think this is how life is designed to work, is we're focused on ourselves primarily at first because we have stuff to work through, baggage issues, our own experiences, a lot of inherited stuff. So from our family, from our generation, from our societal group. And so naturally and rightfully so, we should be focused on ourselves to work through those things. Relationships, business relationships, as well as personal romantic relationships are huge accelerators in this journey of self-discovery. But once we kind of work through a lot of that stuff and release those layers of stuck feelings, as I call them, we naturally start to turn outward and become more of service to others and want to help. And we've done enough, for ourselves at that point. Our cup is full so that we can start, giving to others from that place of strength. Like they say in the airplane, put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you help others. So I think that's the natural course of life. And it's actually quite beautiful because then you have people from a place of strength sharing and helping others.
It's always nice to be in that situation. I don't know. Well, hopefully everyone achieves that. I don't know that they all do in this life. What you're kind of saying, there's 2 points that I saw you make that I think kind of put this in perspective. And the first was, who you are is already perfect. It's how you see yourself that gets in the way of your perfection. And the second part is, when you rely on the world for how you feel, your life is a roller coaster that never ends. And they both kind of seem to go together, and they kind of underline what you've already started to talk about. Can we dig a little deeper into that?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are 2 of my favorite quotes. So essentially, the act of realizing who you are, your authentic self underneath all of that hurtness, all the reactivity, it's an unblemished, whole, complete self that's already there. So it's not about adding to ourselves. It's not about becoming somebody, turning into somebody new, or reinventing ourselves. It's really just about peeling back the layers that keep us from seeing that we're whole and complete and that we're unblemished and that there's just this perfect person underneath, perfect in its own way, right? Not in some external definition of perfect. And so it's really just about letting go of limiting beliefs, letting go of trauma. There's some serious stuff, serious layers, but it's always about letting go, peeling back, releasing that energy that's stuck inside of us, as opposed to any other process of trying to become somebody we're not. So that's really what that speaks to, and we just have to start listening to that inner voice, because we all have it, we all hear it. Gut, intuition, instinct, heart space, higher self, inner divinity. These are all words, but they point to this inner wisdom that we have. And that's what resonates when a situation, person, place, or thing resonates. It's that inner blueprint. And so it's there. It's there for everyone. And we all hear it. And the challenge becomes to listen to it, to act on it, to come out of the noise of our head, and because it's a subtle voice, it's kind of a quiet voice, and so its nature is like hints and nudges, and so we have to quiet ourselves, quiet our minds, and create some stillness in our being for us to really hear that voice.
So we're going to come back to the noise, and we're going to come back to the stuck feelings, and we'll dig deeper. Before we do that, though, I just wanted to touch on a couple other things. The first is you do a lot of retreats with Eckhart Tolle. And I know his big thing is the power of now, being in the moment as we sit there. How did that come to be? Like, what prompted you to partner there and to spend time there?
Yeah, that was part of my own journey. I was a retreat junkie. I went to see everyone that that was alive, from Eckhart to Marianne Williamson to Byron Katie to Joe Dispenza to all various forms of meditation and mindfulness and sound healing and energy healing and you name it, and regression work. Dr. Brian Weiss, lots and lots of influences over time. Law of attraction, of course, and so that just came naturally. That I became more and more involved with some of those organizations, and especially Eckhart after seeing him so many times as a attendee. The opportunity arose to actually become more of a facilitator, and so I jumped at that, of course. And he's just great. His energy is just fantastic and pulls you into presence instantly.
Why were you going to all these different people? What were you trying to get? And then the question is, I mean, did it work or did it not work? Because you went to a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah. So it was because I'd nurtured the external so much for so long that it created a vacuum on the inside, the internal world. And when I started waking up to, oh my gosh, what I'm experiencing out there is really just a reflection of who I am on the inside. And I had kind of maxed out on the outside, and there had to be more to life. And life, the nature of life is change, anicca, as they say in Buddhism. And once you recognize that, then you realize that permanent joy and permanent happiness is not to be found in the external. It's there for a time, but then it fades again. And, you cling to your achievements, and then it turns sour into, misery again. So you can't find that permanent sense of self through the external achievements. And that naturally just kind of shifted me to, oh my gosh, there's a whole world inside of us that is so much bigger that the external is always only a reflection of. And so I went crazy on exploring that world, that side of me. And it's just my nature as a natural seeker, when I'm interested in something. I was never great at school, because if I had a passion for something, I would just immerse myself 24/7. And within, 2 weeks, I'd know everything there was to know. And it didn't make sense to me to sit, in class for a semester, because my passion would drive me to in a much better, more effective way than anything else.
I get it. I have a constant struggle of wanting to learn more and then having to live life. And the list of books and courses and programs grows faster than my ability to get through them. So there is a backlog of all of that stuff. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
We're here today to chat a little bit about your book. What inspired you to write the book, The Journey of Self-Realization?
So my background was in user experience design and audience research, and a lot of corporate work and branding and marketing. And one of the things that you learn from that is accessibility and simplicity. And that's not something I was finding in kind of the spiritual work and a lot of the readings and messages and videos I was watching when I was trying to explore and expand into that self place. And so there's always a thought in me that, eventually I got around to your question earlier is, did it all work? Well, eventually it did all sink in. But there's always a thought in me that if the language had been simpler, if the words didn't get in the way of the wisdom, I might have gotten it sooner. And so, given my background, I set out to rewrite all of that wisdom from a place of simplicity, discoverability, short chapters. You don't even have to read the book. You can just jump into whichever topic you're working on and that you have an issue with, and just make the whole thing a lot friendly and easier to read.
And it was. I read the book. I enjoyed it. It was short. It was very topical in each area and very understandable from that. So let's jump back to what you had talked about earlier. What are stuck feelings and how do we let go of them?
So we live in a world that is constantly looking to elicit a reaction from us. It's how we're conditioned. We're conditioned to live in our heads and constantly judge things as right or wrong, good or bad, for me, against me, true or false. And this constant reactivity is essentially reactivity to thoughts and feelings. Thoughts come and go, feelings arise and pass. That's the natural motion of life. So like we talked about before, things are always coming and going and entering and exiting our experience. There's a natural motion to life. But when we react to them, when we judge them, good or bad, we create a hiccup in that flow, and it takes us out of things showing up and leaving us again. And rather we cling to the good feelings and we try to hang on to those, and that creates a sense of stuckness, right? We're attached to one feeling and not available for the ensuing ones and the next ones. And so we're amplifying one moment and missing out on the next ones. And of course, with the negative ones, especially, we react, we push them away. We don't want to feel that. And so what would naturally arise and pass, we create a stuck feeling out of that by pushing it down. And that, of course, just feeds it and amplifies it over time, and things start to fester. And we've been doing this since we were babies. So there's just a lot of layers of stuck feelings that we have to learn to hold space and observe them again so that they're allowed to come and go like they naturally would. And that's a mindfulness practice right there.
You know, that gave me a little bit of an aha. One of the things I've always talked about is school doesn't teach you about how to use money, how to make money. School doesn't teach you how to live life. Most of these emotional controls are built 0 to 7. But I'm guessing most parents don't know how to teach their kids, nor are there any. I really haven't seen anything that teaches young kids how to master their emotions in those young. And so what happens is if we don't master that, then as adults, we're still acting like 3-year-olds, which is why you see so many adults acting like 3-year-olds.
That's exactly it. I mean, my parents' generation, my dad, typical male side, never talked about emotions. That wasn't even honorable. And my mom's side, she lost her older brother when she was young, and no one came to talk to her about her feelings about this. I mean, a huge loss. And so all this stuff from past generations gets passed along. Lots of research on how that trauma gets imprinted on each generation if it doesn't get resolved and released. So we're carrying a lot of stuff, and most of it isn't even our own. It's just the family patterns that we inherit, and then social patterns and so forth.
And I think the first step is to understand that's what happened and to have awareness. So there was some things in the book that really jumped out at me. One of them was you say your mind doesn't know you. It's just a tool you use. And I'm thinking, especially for me at times, it's like the dog wagging the tail, right? The tool is driving me instead of me driving the tool. So my question is, how do I turn off my brain so I can hear my inner voice? And how do I take control and say, no, you know what, that at this moment, like it's that topic of you give a man a hammer and everything's a nail, right? But yet I think it's a much wider, it's more like a Swiss Army life. So you got to figure out which tool to pull out of it at the time. How do you make that jump to say, wait a minute, I'm in charge, use this tool or this part of the system now?
Yeah. Well, it's not a jump. It's definitely not an on-off switch. We're, like you said, wrestling control back from our mind that has been conditioned to just dominate us and rule us. And our whole life experience is filtered through that reactivity, as we were talking about a moment ago, this judging mind. And we've just given it so much, power that it controls us. So it's coming out of the mind and returning our awareness to our presence, which is our body, which is right now. And that's where, many different techniques exist, but a simple one that everyone has is breath. It's the most universal tool. It's right there. Every situation, it's available. You don't have to have a special room or sit in lotus pose. It's before you go into a meeting or have an important call. There's a moment there where you can just ground yourself with one conscious breath. And it's amazing, tons of research on that as well, how that alone can impact your focus, your balance, state of mind, your decision making, be able to respond to the situation as opposed to reacting to what you think the situation should be, right? That picture we create in our mind that's always trying to predict the future and anticipate every possible outcome. And it doesn't work that way. But we keep doing that because we don't know any better. Like you said, we're not taught these things. Only after a lot of trial and error that, the sense starts to rise that there must be a better way to live life. And there is.
There most definitely is. So our last few guests have mentioned the use of plant medicines to help them, I'm going to call it break the pattern. One of them, he said it was like 400 years of therapy in 4 hours. I'd love to get your thoughts on that and your feelings of what place does it have in helping us maybe make a jump.
Yeah. Well, it's important to hold everything as valid. Everything I talk about and teach about is not having an opinion, essentially, but to find out what works for you. And that's your own truth and your inner truth. And everyone has their own. There's nothing I or anyone should be or can be saying about that. As far as my experience is concerned, the pure practice of presence, of being here now, doesn't require any amplification of your senses. In fact, observing your thoughts and feelings as they are is the quickest path. It's the path of least resistance. You're not introducing any other factors into that equation. And so there is no cleaner or faster approach to getting to that moment of presence than to simply see it as it is. But again, many people, it's all the rage right now. And at my retreats, people inquire all the time if that's something we offer. It's not at this time. And I would just say, again, trust your inner voice, whether or not that is something you want to engage in. The most important piece about all therapies is the integration part. So are you able to hold the insights that you have when you come back down in an integrated way? And that's the key. Of course, that you'll have wonderful, incredible insights. But are you able to, hold on to those in a functional, practical way? Or do you just kind of go back to your old behaviors? Are you aware of the patterns that led to those behaviors, as opposed to just kind of experiencing a glimpse of it? It really needs to sink in deeply for there to be lasting change. And but so I would say experiment and listen to your truth of what feels right.
And I think in at least the situations I know of, this wasn't like, let's just go party kind of thing. It was with facilitators who made sure that you came out with that integration and you took home those things and that you could work on them and continue to come back to that place to say, without, at that point, you don't come back with medicine, you come back on your own, but it kind of opened a door and said, this is how you do it. Because you said you can do this without, in the simplicity of the moment, but how do we do that in the simplicity of the moment? Because it sounds so simple, and I say doing simple is hard.
It is in many ways, right? You look at, Apple products, and I was a designer for 2.5 decades, and the cleanest, simplest products are the hardest to design. So absolutely, That's there's a deep truth to that. I would say the life reveals your next lesson to you on its own accord. It just does. You don't even have to go looking for it. The next lesson will be knocking at your door as soon as you solve the last one. And so there's really no need to try and artificially stimulate yourself, as the way I see it. And the next lesson is always the most appropriate lesson for you anyways. So it's we're seeing things through our own lens. So what we're seeing, what we're attracting, what we're manifesting is a reflection of us. And the next lesson is a reflection of what's wanting to surface next. And so there's a healthy timing to that. And I don't know if it needs to be forced or accelerated in any way. But again, I think that's up to the individual. And of course, it comes down to the practitioner. And, I have no insight or say into which ones are better or worse. And like all things, a proper controlled, safe environment is very important. And then there's people with whom any type of therapy, any type of meditation or treatment doesn't mesh well at all for whatever reason. So these things should be taken not lightly and investigated thoroughly, and then really do your due diligence, not just in terms of research, but what feels right for you at that time.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. And I forget the exact quote, but it's along the lines of, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And we open ourselves up to the opportunity. But I know for me, type A, it's like, we got to do it now. We got to move faster. This isn't working. And it's learning at that point, it's learning to slow down, right? It's learning to be in the moment. And then when you leave, you go to all these different events or courses, is to remember to keep coming back and doing the work. And that's kind of a major aha. It's not just going, it's integrating it into your life, which takes time. And I think it's a practice that needs to be done over time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've spent decades by the time we come around realizing, let's explore our inner life some. We've been led by outcomes, living for the future for a long, long time. So it's not going to happen overnight. At the same time, it does happen remarkably quick once you just sit down in stillness. The anxiety and the discomfort of just sitting still. It arises within seconds, and you already right then and there have something to work with. You don't have to sit around and wait and wonder. And of course, like you said, then the challenge becomes we're so used to seeing results instantly and wanting proof. But that is actually the inverse of what we're trying to achieve. And slowing down is a big piece of that. And just seeing things as they are, bit by bit, 1%, 2%, 5% improvement will have a huge beneficial impact on your life. And there's lots of books written on how 1% change gradually leads to a very consistent, large impact and shift and change. So it's all possible. That's my favorite part, is it doesn't depend on anyone else but yourself. It's how much time you put in to self-discovery is how much you get out of it. And it becomes this really beautiful thing that can open your eyes and heart to a world that is there right in front of us. but we just we're not tuned to it. So it's all about retuning ourselves.
I don't think people understand the power of 1%. It's that simple action done over and over, and that little bit of improvement. And it's when you turn around that you really see it, because too often we're looking at the top of the mountain. Oh, I have so much further to go. But when you turn around and you see how far you've come and you appreciate it, it's kind of eye-opening. There was another thing, and we've kind of touched on this, but let's just dig in a little bit more. You said in the book, remember, most of your suffering comes from your reaction to your feelings, not the feelings themselves. Ultimately, circumstances don't dictate how you feel. How you respond to your circumstances dictate how you feel. Everything is possible all the time. The only limits that exist are your beliefs. So how do we break those limits?
This was a huge game changer for me in my personal journey, is to recognize that my feelings about a situation and then my reaction to my feelings are two different things. They're two separate aspects of the experience. And before, I was just thinking, well, how I react to a situation is my whole experience, but it's not. So feelings show up as sensations in our body somewhere, right? There's an event, an external event that we pick up through our senses. That's the input. And then our brain, based on previous conditioning, interprets that in a particular way. And everyone has their own interpretation. The smell of smoke could remind one person of wonderful childhood, campfires with singing and guitars, and the next person was traumatized by a fire in the house. So we interpret the same stimuli in different ways, and that shows up in our body. So that's one piece. Then how we react to that sensation in our body, that's the second piece. And we can learn to come out of the negative loops by holding space for these sensations and allowing them to truly arise and pass. Because if we keep reacting to it, we're only reinforcing the old pattern, the old interpretation of it. And the mind just never learns to unwire itself from that. So it's all about, observing again, what is, and that is feelings arising and passing. And my reaction to my feelings, everyone's a little different, but it was 95% of my experience consisted of my reaction to how I was feeling, not the feeling itself. So when I learned that, it changed everything in terms of how much energy I was outputting and how much time I was spending on a particular situation, no longer pointing and blaming that it's the situation that's causing this in me, but recognizing that all feelings are very manageable. Most are. They can't kill you. They're just feelings, and it's how we react to them, and that is the majority of our experience. So that's how we linger on a situation. That's how we amplify a moment that's already passed, right? By keep reinforcing that feeling. Somebody cuts us off in traffic and we stew in that feeling. How dare they? Or they shouldn't be on the road. We tell our coworkers, you wouldn't believe what happened, and so on and so on. And so we're not just amplifying that moment that's already gone, but we're missing out on life in the meantime while we're still in reactivity to the past. So there's a lot of time lost, lost in thought, essentially, lost in reactivity, where we're not really alive. And we spend so much time on being healthy and longevity and living a good long life when, research shows we spend at least 50, some people say upwards of 80% of our time every single day lost in thought. That's time not really being here, not really being alive and experiencing what's happening in front of us. So we have a lot of life to gain back from being present.
So true. And as we're reacting to those stimuli all the time, over and over again, we're literally creating those neural pathways, that wiring. And the more it gets created, the deeper the rut it creates. And the harder it is to reroute off of that trodden path. And it becomes a little bit more difficult. One of the things you also talk about is if you wait for your happy future to arrive, you continue to be unhappy because you're aligned with the expectation that tomorrow is always better. And like, that's the saying, right? Oh, my future's so bright. But you're saying that takes away from the moment.
Yes. And that was another game changer for me is I had a really great life work balance in terms of, income and projects and interesting people and industries to be in. And I had a lot of free time to be working on, my passions of music and sports and travel and so forth. And still something was missing. So on paper, it was like the ideal life, long relationships and everything looked great, but I still didn't feel fulfilled. And so it again goes back to when we're living to outcomes. So you could be doing the most amazing activity in the world, but if you're living for that future point of when, you win a tournament or you achieve this or you finish, another album, whatever it may be, that you're not really experiencing the activity right now. And you can never be fulfilled that way, no matter what you do.
This whole journey for you, has it been mostly peeling? Or was there an aha at some point where you made a dramatic shift? It sounds like you walked away from that life and created a new one.
Yeah, I think that it's what we kind of alluded to before. When you have done enough work on yourself, you naturally start to turn outward and want to be of service. And at the time just came for me when I was, my own voice started to emerge from my writings, my journaling, the call to write a book was very new to me. I'd never done that before and hadn't even read that much. And so that was something that required, study and research and really going within myself. Can I really do this? And there's something about your calling, your true calling. I often get asked, what's the difference between your purpose and then just kind of a flippant idea? And your true calling is typically never comfortable. It's asking you to step up or step into your power to expand into something. As the word implies, you're being called to something. So you still have a ways to go. You see what it is, but you still have to study, take classes, expand, work through discomforts. I was very introverted, nothing of a public speaker, and very much concerned about anonymity, a lot of stuff that, was in the way. And so I had to work through that, and I took classes, and you just have to maintain that student mindset always, even now, and you always keep growing. And because you have to work through the things that you then represent. Otherwise, you're not authentic and people can tell.
And they can. And it's when you create that alignment, I think everything starts to be fun and it's enjoyable and you get into the groove. Not easy to find it and not easy to always take the courage to step into it. But over time, if you choose, then you get to do it. You've mentioned a couple times your retreats. Can you share a little bit about what is that all about?
So it's out of my own experience again. Most retreats kind of focus on one thing. It's all meditation or all yoga or all surfing or, just one kind of aspect of a full life. And so I wanted to create something that was truly the full experience of life, which is nurturing mindfulness in the first half of the day, and then noble silence. We do everything in stillness in the mornings as we do breath work and yoga and conscious movement, and then move into excursions and activities for the middle part of the day, where we really bring that stillness into our activities. And there's reminders of how to do things consciously, because ultimately we don't need to sell everything we have and move to a deserted island. It's ultimately doing what we're already doing more consciously, with more awareness, meaning pour your cup of coffee in the morning with, smell the aroma, feel the cup in your hand, the temperature, the swirls of the the milk or whatever it is you're doing, I pour myself a glass of water and I watch, my mind's activity through those 7 or 8 seconds. And again, being okay with what is the trick to all of this. The mind doesn't calm down from wanting it to be calm. It calms down by accepting that it's not calm. And that's one of the paradoxes of life. And it's at the root of all these kind of Zen master the parables that you hear of, the student asks, I want to be more present. And how do I achieve that? And the Zen master says, listen for the river, the lake in the distance. And the student tries to listen, says, I don't hear anything. And the master says, exactly. So it's built into everything, this paradox of life that when we want something, we're actually attracting more lack, more absence of it, because we're coming from that place of I don't have it. Classic law of attraction. So we have to find a way to work with life. It's peculiar that it works this way, but that we, by accepting it as it is, that's actually what brings us closer to what we truly want. And it takes it's a little tricky to get that going at first, because we're taught so much to live on what we see as the proof, and we set goals and go for it, and we're told to work hard and roll up our sleeves and make it happen. But we can make it happen. We can make everything happen. Everything is possible, but it's not by forcing it. There is a path of least resistance, and that it comes from the first step to change is to accept things as they are. And then change happens a lot easier.
And I think that is one aha for people, is there is a path with less resistance, but unless you believe that you don't have to work hard, you will think you have to work hard to achieve this. And I think one of my recent ahas is not that I need more, but that I need less. So it's the power of subtraction, of letting go of things, not of adding more things. And yet my book list and my course list grow. But it's that it's that groove that I have to learn to let go of. And it's funny because every time I do something else, I'm like, yeah, I know this. Yeah, I know this. Did I implement? No, not necessarily. And so it's just it's letting go. What advice would you give someone who feels stuck or discouraged in their path?
Well, the first part is to recognize that you're stuck and that you're feeling discouraged. And that is already a big piece of it. It's awareness. It's not a blind repeating of just some pattern and you're miserable and you don't even know why. And you numb out and try to distract yourself all the time. It is to notice, I'm not feeling fulfilled. There must be more to life. And that's the first step to then becoming a seeker. And there's so many different ways to bring change into the dynamic. We hold everything, every relationship with every object, place, or thing or person. We hold it in place with our judgment of it. That's 50% of the equation. It takes 2, right? So if we have tension with a family member, well, the way we view them, the way we treat them, how we speak to them, with whatever we want them to be different, we want them to be more like us and so forth. That's contributing half of the dynamic of the relationship. So just like you described, letting go, allowing things to be as they are, that is the first big step that brings change into the situation. And then go from there, see how it evolves. There's no kind of magic formula. It's, again, responding to what's happening, what's in front of you, as opposed to thinking, or I have to take steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everyone's different. Every situation is unique. But if you're alert and you learn to trust yourself, your ability to respond to what's there, because that's what's real. That's the only thing that's real, and that's what you have to work with. Anything else is excess fluff or excess noise. So work with what's there, and the solutions tend to reveal themselves. You tend to, because now you're working with a true tool set, with the true elements that at play. And if you're tuned into that, then you know what your Lego pieces are for this particular situation, and you can build the structure the way you want it. Mindfulness and presence is all about taking action, but clear action, not action that comes from a place of Reactivity, that's divisive, that's confrontational, it's narrow in its view. But seeing things as they are, now you have as broad a possible a tool set to work with and make it happen the way you want it for your life. And that's you're just being a very practical, not lingering on anything unnecessarily, very efficient type of approach to living and making the most out of it.
Since you've worked with so many people, do you notice that there's a particular path? And what I mean by that is, are there certain milestones along the way that you see with people? Like, it's not necessarily the exact, like, can you see their next step that they kind of need to take, but not necessarily saying this is the way to do it? Because I know you can't give somebody their next step. They have to figure it out. But can you see like, oh, I see where on this journey you are. This is kind of what it looks like.
So the first step, great questions, by the way. The first step is always to look at what you're currently doing and just do it more consciously. So it's never about throwing everything out the window, moving to a new city, changing jobs or changing a relationship. You'll just bring yourself and your old lens on life, your old reactivity with you. And before long, it'll just be the same life experience as before. So the first step is to look at your existing routines. So routines are things that are already in place. You don't have to add another to-do item to your daily list, but rather just work with things of taking your dog for a walk, going down to the corner coffee shop, whatever it may be, where you go sit at lunch. And do those things more consciously so that you come out of resistance, this resistance cloud that we live under when we're always kind of thinking and lost in thought. So once that comes out, you might find that I actually do enjoy my job. It's just I've been making myself miserable with just overthinking and resistance to it. And resistance is a very small experience of life. And so when we come out of that, then it just naturally gets bigger and there's opportunities that you see that you didn't see before because you were just keeping yourself small. So that's the first step really, is do everything you're already doing, but with more presence, with more awareness. And as you become more aware, you nurture this awareness muscle, you become the container for life to enter and exit your experience. You become the container for thoughts coming and going, for feelings arising and passing. And so the container is always bigger than that which it contains. So no situation, you get to the point where no situation is bigger than you. You can handle everything. Nothing can get to you. It can still be uncomfortable. There's still unpleasant feelings, of course, but they no longer rule you. They don't own you like before, but you can hold space and let it pass because it all naturally does.
What's the next step kind of after that? Like once we hold space, once we start to have awareness, then what's next?
Well, it'll be for everyone. It'll be their own inner wisdom that is starting to tell them, maybe I do need to change careers. Maybe it's time for a new chapter. Maybe I need to have conversation with family or my partner that I need more space. It's speaking up for yourself in a more authentic way, living more, to your truth of how you carry yourself, the energy you have. People that are authentic are magnetic. We all know that. We can feel it. We can sense it. And we want more of that for ourselves. I call it the BU mojo. And so our whole attitude shifts towards life, and we bring a calmness into situations that wasn't there before. People start to want to be on our team because what you bring. So you could be living technically the same life, doing the same things, but the way you do it and the depth and the quality of how you do it, it's a whole nother level. And you can find joy in everything when you rise above the reaction to just individual things that take you on this roller coaster ride of life, but rather you become the observing presence to life happening. Then you become part of the happening. You're a facilitator. And you're part of the big current that is behind all of this. So that's the best feeling in the world.
It is. You mentioned before that playing small. Do you find most people playing small? And why, if so?
Yeah, it's a default kind of conditioning. It starts very young. We cry for milk, and as soon as we cry, we get it. Hopefully, there's a caretaker that provides us, but we start to get wired a certain way that by complaining and by wanting things to be different than they are, that we might get what we really want and desire, and it's just not how it works. And early on, we don't have the tools yet to discern whether or not a situation is for us or not for us, whether thoughts that others imprint us with, whether that's something we want to take on. So we kind of get imprinted with all this stuff, and we can't really help it. You could be a little toddler with your mom in the supermarket, and that moment where you want and need a hug, she turns to the next aisle to get something, and boom, you feel abandoned. And so it's just going to happen. So, and that's kind of the journey then. It's through working through this stuff that we find back to our deepest, truest self. And there's something interesting about this, that if we were just perfect from the get-go and didn't have to go through all this, there might be some that say, hey, why do we need to go through all this then? But and I always tell the story of the fisherman on the dock, and a businessman comes along and says, why don't you throw 2 rods in there and you could pull out twice as many fish? And the fisherman goes, well, why should I do that? Well, then you can, hire another person. And then why should I do that? Well, then you can buy a net. And why should I do that? Then you can buy a boat and then a fleet and so on. And then at the very end, fisherman he says, well, why should I do that once he has the fleet? And then the businessman says, well, so you can sit on the dock and fish. So at first it seems like it was all for nothing. He winded back on the dock fishing, which he was doing in the beginning, but he missed the journey of all that what happened. So again, life is not the outcome. It's not winding up back on the dock fishing, which you could have done from the get-go, but rather going through that experience of all those ups and downs and around and twists and turns of life. And they all show you something more about you. So when you do finally come back to your true self, you have this maturity and this depth that if you were just sitting there all along would never have happened. So that's really what life wants us to do. It wants us to get off the couch. It wants us to start doing. We realize ourselves in the doing, not in the wishing and the hoping and sitting around. So roll up your sleeves, just start doing. Don't plan too much. That's the other part of this. We tend to want to map it all out, have everything planned out for the rest of our lives. But that's not magical. That's no adventure. Let life take you on the adventure that it is, because it's prompting you all the time to let it take you on a ride, and just say yes and see where it takes you.
It's funny. Many of the lessons we are taught are actually the opposite of what the lesson should be. Because most people talk about the fisherman story and say, why you're doing all the in-between. And here you are saying, no, you have to go do all the in-between. And it's funny how those lessons come to be. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
It's experiencing the abundance within. Every thought is a limiting thought. Every belief is a limiting belief. The more we can allow, the more we surrender to what is, that opens us up to everything. It's the inverse of what it seems, but the less we hold on to, the more we have and the more we attract.
Which, in my mind, I'm like, every time I have a thought, I should ask, how is this limiting me?
You could say that. That's incredible awareness right there. So just by saying that, you are no longer identifying with that thought. You're not the thought. And identification with thought is what leads to the monkey mind pulling us into one thought leads to the next and the next. So having that perspective right there, that keeps you out of it and keeps you in the driver's seat. Beautiful.
Thank you. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I don't think that way. Everything happened the way it happened. It needed to happen. Got me to where I am today. There's no sense to, the mind likes to look back, and in hindsight and 2020 vision, we all know that stuff. But ultimately, there is a lesson in everything that we needed to learn, because that's how we viewed the world at that particular time. And that was us. What was happening was us, a reflection of us. So we can't complain about that. We can't want it to be different. It had to happen. And that's what led us to the next moment and the next, and where we are today.
Maybe that's what you learned. It had to happen.
Yes, that's what. Good one.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Live through your senses. So our senses, what we see, what we hear, what we touch, what we feel, what we smell, that's the glue that keeps us attached to the present moment. That's the connective tissue of right now. We can't see something that hasn't already happened. We can't smell something from the future. We can't hear a sound that hasn't happened yet. So if we just stay connected to our senses, then you are automatically being present. And then you really, truly enjoy pretty much any activity. You don't have to do something extraordinary or jump out of an airplane. You can if you want, but ultimately everything becomes a joy. Folding your laundry, doing the dishes, everything is right now. That's what's real, and what's real is magical.
That it is. If people would like to learn more about you, the retreats, the book, what is the best way for them to do that?
So the best way is my website, cirak.com. That's CIRAK.com. And you can find me everywhere on social media at Chris Cirak.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rocky. Such a pleasure.
I really enjoyed the conversation with Chris about that inward journey. It's one that I'm still working on myself. And it's good to always be reminded about some of the different ways that we can do it, and looking at things from just a different viewpoint. Letting go of limiting beliefs and stuck feelings to really feel within ourselves. And I think that's the one thing that I've learned, is that we don't even know what some of those stuck feelings are within us. We just react to them. And until we see that, how do you get rid of it? You can't. And so we've just kind of got to do the work. And it's a little at a time. It's not this major life transformation overnight. It's little, showing up every day and just paying attention to every little thing and analyzing ourselves. I enjoyed his book as well. Do you know someone who would also benefit from this episode that we had with Chris? If you do, I'd appreciate you sharing this with them. Next week, we've got Dr. John Finn, who's going to talk about habits and how to rewire your brain to become a habit mechanic. Great insights. Thank you for listening. Have an abundant week.